Food is the one I'm so big about because I've watched tons and tons and tons of food documentaries and stuff. Like before the Dust Bowl, we had this one kind of wheat that was totally fine, and I don't think it really was that bad for people. But during the Dust Bowl, the regular wheat was dying, so we combined the normal wheat with Japanese wheat, and it created this super wheat that. And then they started using before Roundup, what it was the DDT during the Dust Bowl, and then we had this generation of people that was like hemophilic because of the DDT. They weren't before, and there's like a genetic component. Now the offspring are also hemophilic, and it's like, how much of this shit is stuff that we messed up in the last 100 years? You know, how much? You can look at these numbers, like the diabetes, which was unheard. That it's type 2 is the onset one, right? There were like 3 or 4 mentioned cases of type 2 diabetes in all of recorded history until we discovered sugar, like sugar cane in the 1500s or something. Like, it was a freak thing. It just is a nonsense freak thing. And now it's like one of the most common causes of illness, right?
Oh, it's a big industry.
Yeah.
And it's all eating the wrong food.
Yeah, I mean, but this is the thing. We can kind of, like, everyone understands these things, right? However, you can't, and this is the thing where I push back, and actually it's ironic that I do so, because my blog is called Master Self, and the tagline for the website is Master Yourself, Save the World, right? Or Save the World, Master Yourself, rather. There's a certain point where we cannot rely on the willpower and the self-reliance of the average person to fix these problems. You cannot do it, because, man, it's fucking hard. It's like, look, fasting. If you're talking about curing all this stuff, nobody needed to know how to, like, if you say you're 400 pounds, the only way, the fastest way you're going to lose 400 pounds, you can just not eat for 300 days, right? And your body's able to do that. But the amount of willpower required to do that, I know like one person in recorded history who's done that long of a fast. He did like 387 days or something like that, which is insane. It was medically supervised as well in the 70s. But the average person should not require infinite titanic amounts of willpower to live a healthy, normal life, right? We made it so hard, so difficult to live a healthy, normal life, right?
Right.
If you need to be able to resist infinite advertising. You're going to drive past temptation every second of every day, and these billboards and the radio ads are going to scream at you basically without your consent on your fucking phone, to your kids, magazines, on your computer. Every second of every day, people are trying to give you poison or whatever. It's insane.
No, they want to sell it to you. They're going to
sell. Yeah, they want to sell you poison. You're going to pay for this punishment, right?
Yes.
And so it's not, so it should not be like this, right? It's wrong. There's something fundamentally wrong about this.
This is a moral argument. I like that.
This is more than a moral argument. It's a functional argument, right? It's like not the solution.
The should part is moral. That's how I look at should and shouldn't as a moral argument. That's a moral dimension.
Right. So I would say there are multiple components. So there's the moral argument, which is it shouldn't be like this. There's a functional argument, which is if we're going to fix it, it is not going to be fixed simply by having people develop immense amounts of willpower overnight.
We agree.
Right?
This would be the argument for the localism and moral governance. So political, which is is ultimately force. We can force the people who are bringing the toxins in to get out. Right, the pernicious influence will be removed from our community because we will force them to do so by police action.
I mean, yeah, that would be incredible if you could do it.
We could do it.
It's like, look, it's the same thing as like if you have a neighborhood where a drug dealer shows up, right? You have a nice neighborhood. I'm sorry, but you can either wait for the cops to fix it, or you can say, hey, I really don't want this guy selling crack to my kids or my neighbor's kids.
There's a story. I'm going to tell you a story. I ran into a patient, young guy. And his brother was he lived in California, and he was motocross. He made the money doing that. He was getting money from it. I am, and he said he got tied up. He was getting methamphetamines or something. And so this guy, he just went to every dealer that he knew in town. He says, "If you sell my brother stuff, I will kill you." Any questions? And it was like, nobody's going to sell him any stuff anymore. And it's like, okay, I don't know how well that works because I haven't seen him for many years. And it's like, but it is, I don't know what else you can do. Because it's like to depend on I have another fellow that complains of it. There's a guy that's doing this next door to him in my town. And it's like, they're selling the stuff. And it's like, the police are like just observing. And I don't know, watching the comings and goings for their own purposes, right? To get bigger fish, maybe, who knows? It's like, so it's like there are wheels turning that don't make sense, right? It's like it doesn't make sense. How do you resolve the problem in your backyard, right?
And that's because ultimately one of the things that I've discovered in the kind of my personal journey, which I detailed a bit of, but I didn't really get into like the psychological parts of that. That's an entirely different topic. But out of the blog is there is a finite there's a point in the journey of like self-improvement, self-mastery where your capacity to be, if you want to pull like a Jordan Peterson thing, he's like, well, you increase the amount of order that you can maintain until it starts to encompass other people, bucko. But like there's a certain point where in the process of self-improvement, self-mastery, you actually have to start taking responsibility for the people around you.
That's right.
Right. And
That's right.
obviously, I personally think from a moral or philosophical perspective, everyone should internalize the notion that everything in the world is my fault and everything in the world is my job to solve.
Right.
Right. Or at least that's the goal to strive towards. It's impossible to do that all the time.
Right.
Right. Or even but if you look at that as that's the moral ideal, is how can I take responsibility for the problem, every single problem in the world, and act from that position, you're moving in the right direction. And that means that it's not just at a certain point, it's not just you. Like one of the things for me, I quit drinking because I realized, oh, it's not just about me drinking, it's about the example that I'm setting for other people when I drink, that I'm setting them up if other people do bad stuff because they're drinking, I'm making it harder for them to, or easier for them to do that, right? Or stuff like that. In that vein is like that's actually why I got this tattoo, which is the sword of Damocles.
Huh. I was
As
wondering
that
about that
basically,
sword.
yeah. So for the viewer, there's a story, a Greek story, I believe, where there's a king and he's got all these concubines and they're feasting and they're having a good time. And this young guy, Damocles, runs up. He's like, "Why do you get all this nice stuff? I want some nice stuff." And the king's like, "Oh, cool, sure, let's do it. You can be king for a day and see how you like it." He's like, "Oh, great, all right, I deserve it." So next day shows up and he gets all this food and all the concubines. He's having a good time. But the king is like, "Actually, here's the catch. I'm gonna tie up the sword hanging from a horsehair above the throne, where only you can see it. And while you have all this fun, you're just going to know that at any moment that string could break and the sword will kill you instantly." Right.
Right.
And so Damocles gets really uncomfortable. Eventually he runs away in terror, right? Because he can't handle that. And so the notion of that, why I like that story is leadership is not a reward, it's a punishment, but it's a necessary one. You have to be able to like accept that other people rely on you and you have to take responsibility for them, and that's very, very important.
Right.
Right. And so with self-improvement, that at a certain point you do realize like it's not enough. Like, yes, in a perfect world, every single person would self-improve to the point that they could be 100% responsible all the time. Right. I can't do that.
Nobody.
I don't know anyone who can. It's not
Right.
happening, right? However, there are some people who are never going to be able to even achieve a functional level of responsibility, right? It's just not likely to happen. And we can say, well, oh, it's their job to do that, and it is. It doesn't matter, because if it's not going to happen, we still have to take responsibility for that and act accordingly. And that's ultimately what I think leadership is. It's like
Mm.
there's a story in Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene, where he talks about this sea captain in the late 18, early 1900s. He like go on this expedition to the Arctic or wherever, and they get snowed in, and their boat gets frozen in the Arctic over the winter. And so it's like dark for months, right? There's like barely any daylight because they're up north. It's
Right.
freezing, and so they talk about why they survived, because they survived. It's like 6 or 9 months of just winter. Because every single day the captain would go around and talk to every single one of the men, figure out where their mental state was, and he would adjust their workload based off how well they were doing. And he, because of that ability for him to change the responsibility levels that he expected of people, which is, I expect you to do as much as you can do, not as much as I want you to do, right? And to be able to monitor people's states and do that accordingly, that is the essence of what it is, right? A person of a high enough level of self-mastery has to be able to recognize in other people, like, hey, I can't have the same expectations for everyone, right?
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Best Medicine Podcast with Bradley H. Werrell, DO. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe below, either over there or over there. Also, if you're interested in a medical consultation with myself, there's also information below.